Get located. I wanted you to see my full body this morning. Very, very full body. And we got everybody get located. Oh, shut up. Back there, close to the turkey, I imagine. I'm mean this morning. I was loving last night, and that can't last for long. That love stuff, a little of that love goes a long ways. Okay.
Brother Hyles was in Washington, D.C., driving along the Potomac River. It was autumn 1975, and the trees had put on their coats of many colors. With awe, he watched them. Suddenly, he noticed the most beautiful tree of them all. How big, how stately, how beautiful were its leaves. He pulled over to the side of the road and looked at it and took some time to love the God who made it. Then the thought occurred to him that there are many thousands of little trees and bushes out in the woods that were never seen by human eyes and which received no attention whatsoever. He wondered how many little bushes and trees in that very forest had lived an entire lifetime unnoticed. He got out of his car, walked back into the woods, picked out one little bush, and he named it the out-of-the-way bush. And he talked to it for a while, and this is what he said.
I had to look to find you with tender, extra care. And though I'd never seen you, I knew that you were there. Soon, there you were before me, so delicate and shy, so timid and so silent, unseen by passers-by. I saw your face was reddened with introverted blush, for you well knew that you are a little out-of-the-way bush. While others watched the tulips, my eyes were fixed on you. The willow wasn't lonely, for you were weeping too. I saw you had a complex, an inferiority one. For there you were so peaked for hiding from the sun. Your branches were bowed slightly. Your talk was just a hush. You were ashamed of being a little out-of-the-way bush. Please listen, little shy one, and turn toward me your head. You need not feel neglected. Your face need not be red. God made the mighty oak tree, yet made the bramble too. The God who clothed the willow has made a coat for you. You may be in the forest, in a corner oh so dim, 'cause you're not viewed by others. You're only seen by Him. He did not make your branches to lie upon the shelf. He made you, little shy one, to have you to Himself. Stand taller, lift your branches, and make your plumes look plush. You are to Him important, dear little out-of-the-way bush. No bird on you e'er lighteth. Your leaves are never shown. For God o'er you is jealous. He wants you for His own. See, that's the way He planned it, for you to be unknown. Oh, see, quaint one, He wants you with Him to be alone. While others are exalted and in the busy rush, He puts you in the back row, a little out-of-the-way bush. There is a place for tulips, for oaks and willows too. But there in your small corner is God's planned place for you. He has to share His redwoods with tourists passing by. He shares the showy dogwoods with thousands drawing nigh. He shares with all His creatures the hedges, neat and trim. But when He cometh nigh you, it's only you and Him. When 6 days He hath labored to care for us below, he needed on the Sabbath a quiet place to go. So raise your branches skyward and higher, higher push, for you are God's oasis, his little out-of-the-way bush.
I would love to tell you what I think of Jesus, since I found in him a friend so strong and true. I would tell you how he changed my life completely. He did something that no other friend could do. No one ever cared for me like Jesus. There's no other friend so kind as he. No one else could take the sin and darkness from me. Oh, how much he cared for me. All my life was full of sin when Jesus found me. All my heart was full of misery and woe. Jesus placed his strong and loving arms about me, and he led me in the way I ought to go. Every day he comes to me with new assurance. More and more I understand his words of love. But I'll never know just why he came to save me, till someday I see his blessed face above. No one ever cared for me like Jesus. There's no other friend so kind as he. No one else could take the sin and darkness from me. Oh, how much he cared for me.
Our Heavenly Father, bless these moments that we share together in a very special way. Give me a clear mind and a ready expression, and give the people hearts to hear, understand, and receive. Amen. I've taken a little different course this morning that I had planned to take. And I'd like for you to just listen to me. I'd rather you not take notes. I have and had a stack of lessons that I was going to teach Some of those I have taught and some I have not. But this morning I had planned to go one direction. I've decided to go another one. I'm going to psychoanalyze my sermon last night and let you inside my thinking, my heart, and my mind. I have preached now over 66,000 sermons. I would like for you to really listen to me this morning. Last night may have been the hardest one I've ever preached. I don't think I ever felt quite as lonely as I felt when I went home last night. Miss Hyles will tell you I was very quiet. I wouldn't hurt you. I love you. You're my crowd. And everything I said last night was to help you. You see, nobody can destroy you but you. Your enemies can't destroy you. They may lead you to self-destruct, but they cannot destroy you. The very fact that I'm standing behind this pulpit this morning is a testimony of that fact. So I want to talk to you this morning a little bit about unselfishness, a little bit about love, and I want to just, and all I'm going to say this morning, some of it was planned last night when I got back. Please put your notebooks up now, son, if you would. I want you to listen to me. Practically everything I'm going to say, though I've said it before, I sort of bundled it up last night and early this morning. When I was a young preacher, just 21 years of age, I was pastoring the Grange Hall Baptist Church in outside Marshall, Texas, out in the country. It's the same building that now is on the campus of Hyles Anderson College. So if our people went down, we bought the building, we dismantled it, they did, and brought the very materials up here and reassembled it just like it was. And the building is there just like it was, 52, 53 years ago. That little church was the hottest thing in East Texas. It was the talk of East Texas. And I was only 21, 22, 23 years of age at the time. We had a citywide revival. I hope you'll listen to every word. We had a citywide revival. All the Baptist churches got together and had a citywide meeting. I would not ever cooperate in a meeting that's citywide with churches other than fundamental Baptist churches. An evangelist came. His name was R.T. Strange. R.T. Strange was a dynamic preacher. I was just a kid preacher. He preached the citywide revival, and we had a wonderful meeting, and he was a very popular man in our city at the time. To my chagrin, R.T. Strange, shortly after the revival, was called to pastor the Second Baptist Church of Marshall, Texas. Literally scores of my members live within a few blocks of the Second Baptist Church. It had been a dead church. Not many people attended, though they had a nice sized auditorium. It scared me to death. I just couldn't sleep at night. I just knew that my days were numbered. That well-known evangelist, I was just a little unknown kid preacher out in the country. He'll get all my members. Literally scared me to death because he was coming to town. But I learned something. The greatest year that church had was the first year after R.T. Strange came to Second Baptist Church of Marshall. I learned that not to fret or worry about competition. I learned not to be jealous of somebody else who's having a good ministry. And R.T. Strange did have a good ministry, but our year was the greatest year we'd ever had. In 1959, Ms. Hyles and I came to Hammond. I was the only kid on the block. There was not a fundamental church within driving distance. If you got mad at me, you had no place to go. You just went and sat on the back row of the auditorium. There's no place to go. Now then, we have over 40 graduates of Hyles Anderson College, pastoring within driving distance of where we are now. One of those men for a number of years pastored within 10 blocks of where I'm standing right now. There are 10 churches within a 20-minute drive of where I live that I myself, if I were a layman, could join. And yet the truth is, the old church downtown is having the greatest years it's ever had in its life. In 1970, we started Hammond Baptist Schools. Christian school in this area was unheard of at the time. And busloads came. They came from down in Lowell, Indiana. They came from over in Hazel Crest, Illinois. They came from over in Chesterton. They came from Michigan City. They came from 50 and 60 miles away to our Hammond Baptist schools. Now then, we have 5 graduates, close enough for any of our people to go to their school. We have good schools all over the area, and 10 other schools. There are at least 15 schools now close enough for my people to attend. And all these places I mentioned a while ago have their own schools now, and you'd think that would hurt the Hammond Baptist schools. But the truth is, we're enjoying our greatest years at Hammond Baptist schools. I wish I could talk some of you guys into quit being jealous of the guy down the road. 1972, we started Hyles Anderson College. For after we'd started our college, shortly thereafter, Jim Vineyard came. Jim Vineyard happens to be, in my opinion, one of the best Christians I ever met. I love Jim Vineyard. He was here 4 years, and though he likes to tell about all the squabbles we had, he's just a bag of wind when he says that. We've never had one squabble. Never had a man easier to work with than Jim Vineyard. And I love him, believe in him. And Jim Vineyard was here. But you know what that rascal did? When he left us to pastor, he went down and started a college in Oklahoma City. Boy, he had his nerve, didn't he? And you know what? He was after the same young people that we're after. That isn't all. Boy, you wait till you hear this. This will rot your socks. One of our graduates, my ex-friend, Dr. Bob Gray. You know what he did? Stinking idiot. I mean, beloved brother. He goes down to Longview, Texas, starts a college. He sends his singing groups and traveling groups to the same places we send ours. Rascal's trying to get the same kids we're trying to get. I hate his intestines. That isn't all. Right out here in Sauk Village, Illinois, within a 20-minute drive of where I'm standing right now, one of our graduates, John Hanks, started a college. Right down the road from Hyles Anderson College. I TP'd his house. What nerve that rascal's got. That isn't all. Dr. Jack Trieber started a college out in California. We had students coming from all over California. I'd preached out there every year for 20 years, and that rascal started a college and tried to get the same kids we're trying to get in California. That isn't all. Slim Gomez. Keith Gomez. Right across town. An hour and a half from where I'm standing right now. That rascal starts a college. You understand how these fellows have betrayed me? Bob Gray, Jim Vineyard, John Hanks, Jack Trieber, Keith Gomez. I didn't know. Of all people, the man that's probably been better to me than any preacher in America, Tom Neal, Slim Jr. That stinking rascal last year started a college. Mike Holloway, another one of our graduates, right down here in Kokomo. I would live in a town with a dumb name like that. Right down there in Kokomo, Indiana. he started a college. You understand, I have called the names of 4 of our beloved alumni who have gone away and betrayed their alma mater and started a college. Now, the truth is, Hyles Anderson College is having its best year. I met for several hours with Dr. Tom Neal, my dear friend. Met with him for several hours and helped him set up his curriculum. I think I sent one of my men down to help him. And I rejoice in his school. I flew to California at my own expense and met Dr. Jack Trieber at the Red Carpet Club, United Airlines, in the airport, and spent several hours with him, helping him set up his college. When I heard that Keith Gomez was starting a college across town, immediately I invited him to come to Hyles Anderson College and speak on our chapel program. You see, nobody can hurt you but you. Bob Gray comes every year to our college. If we had a vote as the most popular guest speaker we have, Dr. Bob Gray would come very close to winning. If we had 10 speakers, he'd come at least 10th place. But he's a very popular speaker at our college. They love him dearly. I go to his place and preach every year. I preach every year for Dr. Gray, Dr. Neal, Dr. Gomez. I preach often for Dr. Vineyard. He speaks here. We hold him in the highest regard. I preach for Brother Holloway. These are all my friends. You say, what are you trying to say? I'm trying to tell you what a bunch of idiots I have for friends. No, I'm trying to say that God blesses unselfishness. I'm trying to say that we're not the only kid on the block. I'm trying to say that America needs every one of these colleges. John Wesley used to say, the world is my parish. For 40 years, America has been my parish. I'm concerned about saving America, not building a college. And the more we have, the better I like it. You see, young preachers, listen to me carefully for a minute. The pendulum swings. When I was a young preacher in Garland, Texas, for example, I took a church to about 44 people on our first anniversary without ever running a bus. Never ran a bus all the time I was there. Nobody ever thought about buses in those days. We had 617 our first anniversary. I mean local, right there on the spot. Second anniversary, 1180. Third anniversary, 2212. Fourth anniversary, 3163, averaging over between 16 and 1800 a Sunday without a bus on our fourth anniversary. Our church was across the tracks. We were a little church out the edge of town, you might say. Neighborhood church, where all the poor white trash went. Downtown was the big First Baptist Church. Dr. Charles Cockrell was pastor there. And that was the big wealthy church downtown. Now, wait a minute now. I never visit a person that belongs to somebody else's Baptist church. Never do. But they came. And a young couple came, and then another couple came, and then an influential doctor and his wife came and joined our church. I never asked them, never visited them. I don't want to build my church on somebody else's members. But they came. We didn't turn them down, of course. Hundreds of them came from the old First Baptist Church downtown and the old preacher down there. They came out to this young, good-looking guy pastoring that was new and fresh and young. Now, I'm the older pastor. I pastor the church downtown. Younger men come to this area to pastor. Men like I used to be. Men with the zeal of youth and the freshness of youth. On occasion, some of my people go to their churches. Now, listen carefully to me. Don't you think if I took it back yonder when they were coming my way, I ought to take it now if they go the other way? Don't you think as an older preacher I ought to be graceful and gracious when people would leave my church and go out to the edge of town to some other young man's church? Just a few blocks over here in East Chicago, one of my dear friends came to pastor there. I can drive, I believe I could drive there in 7 or 8 minutes from right now, from where I stand now. He's doing a good work. I like the guy. Just recently, I gave him, I think, $8,000 or $9,000 and bought him a shuttle bus so he could shuttle his people from a parking area. I'm for the guy. I love the guy. Now, you listen carefully to me, fellas. You don't have to worry about anything in this world but that one little spot right there beneath your collar. That's all you have to worry about. Let me sort of ramble a while. I've been here before. To those of you who are here, most of you, this is a new movement. Exciting, strong, fundamental King James Bible, separatist movement. But you see, I've been here before. This is my second time around. Some of the fellows that you preach against were my good friends back yonder 40, 50 years ago. We were like you are now. Young, active, rebels, if you please. I've been through this before. Now I want to make a statement. You see, you're my crowd. But they were my crowd. And I still love them. Let me say it again. To you, they're just a bunch of fellows that are compromising, some of them. But back yonder years ago, they had the same, many of them had the same position you have now. And I sat with them like I'm with you today. And we were the enthusiastic crowd, growing up together, getting older together. We used to gather at Tennessee Temple like you're gathering here. Now, you guys, I'm simply saying, you're my crowd. This is, and let it be known, this is my crowd. I don't run with the other crowd anymore. This is my crowd. But they were my crowd. In case you ever get a King James Bible and open it, you might open it to 1 Corinthians chapter 13. And you might check down around verse 4 where it says, love never faileth. Which means if I loved them, I still love them. Now, I'm not asking you to join the other crowd or run with the other crowd. I wouldn't advise you to run with them. But I am telling you that I love them. If that be treason, make the most of it. But see, you don't understand. As I said a while ago, they were my crowd. Maybe some of them have changed. Maybe I have. I don't know. Maybe they changed some and I changed some. But regardless of it, there's many of those fellows I can't run with anymore. But love never faileth. So I'm not upset with you if you want to skin their hides, because you don't know them like I did. But don't be upset with me if I love them, because you never knew them like I knew them. I preached over 20 years for Dr. Jerry Prevost. 11 years in a row for Dr. Tom Wallace. Over 30 consecutive years at the Bill Rice Ranch. Many times for Dr. Jerry Falwell. I think 31 years for Dr. Gary Coleman. I preached for Dr. Tim LaHaye when he was pastor of the Baptist Church. And those days, a strong fundamentalist. Jack Van Impe was my personal friend. I preached for Dr. Clyde Box, Dr. Clarence Sexton, Dr. Raymond Barber, and others. You may preach against some of these fellows, and I'm not saying you shouldn't. But when I think of some of them, I hurt on the inside because I happen to love them. Oh, I didn't say I'm going to have them preach for me. I just said I love them. Well, you say, Brother Hyles, Why do you love them? Because love never faileth. Love never faileth. Can you imagine if some of the, and by the way, you're going to live to see this. You're going to live to see the day when young men in this room right now who are wild young bucks are going to compromise and change and sell out. And you're going to love them still. And some young preacher is going to come up then and shoot at them, and you're going to think maybe they ought to be shot at, but you're going to hurt every time the trigger's pulled. I was preaching in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, at a Sunday school convention for Dr. Charles Stevens. Dr. Stevens is the guy that I told you about last year, I think. He pastored for years and lived to be over 90. A little kid came up one time and asked him, said, Dr. Stevens, was you in the ark? Dr. Stevens said, of course not. He said, why didn't you drown then? I'm bearing my heart to you. I was preaching that night, and two good-looking, tall young men walked in the back and sat down in the back row. If you had seen them walk in, you'd been very impressed. Obviously, they were somebody. When the service ended, those two young men walked down the center aisle. One of them extended his hand to me, and he said, my name is Jerry Falwell. Just a couple of youngsters. This is my assistant pastor, Brother Moon. He said, Dr. Hyles, could we drive you to the airport? We admire you very much. Could we drive you to the airport? I said, yes, I'll be happy for you to. He said, they drove me to the airport. He said, I've started a church. We're just getting our foundation down now in Lynchburg, Virginia. He said, I have some questions to ask you. And they quizzed me all the way to the airport. He wrote me and asked me if I'd come to his church, and I did. Don't leave me now. I went to his church. I organized his Sunday school. He didn't have a nursery. I organized his nursery. I departmentalized his Sunday school and totally organized. He told me, I know nothing about organization. He was just a young preacher. Can you help me? And I spent a few days there and organized the Sunday school for the Thomas Road Baptist Church of Lynchburg, Virginia. I was in Ottawa, Canada, sitting in my motel room. Phone rang. The voice said, this is Jerry Falwell. I'd like to start a bus ministry. Could you come and help me start a bus ministry? I flew to Lynchburg. I preached to his people on Monday night, gave an invitation. Over 200 of them came forward to work on the buses. During the day on Tuesday, I and my assistant, Dr. Charlie Hand, got a map of the city. We divided the city into areas, had a meeting with the bus volunteers, and decided in what area each of the folks would work, and totally organized the bus ministry for Dr. Jerry Falwell. Now, wait a minute, folks. You don't forget that. To you, he's just a fellow who's too interested in politics and running around with the wrong crowd. To me, he's still a young preacher that I helped. I spoke at his graduation. He spoke at ours. 5 consecutive years, I think it was. He brought his entire staff to pastor school. He was in a battle once, and I flew to Washington, D.C. and stood beside him against some big officials there in his battle. I spoke at his super conference on 2 occasions. He and I and Dr. Truman Dollar and Dr. A.V. Henderson formed a committee for the Nelson publishers and wrote some Sunday school literature and met once every few months together and wrote some Sunday school literature for the Sunday schools of America. Now, crucify me if you want to, but love never faileth. You see his changes and want to fight. I see his changes and want to cry. A few years ago, he did a favor for someone whom I love dearly. I picked up the phone and called him on the phone. and said, Jerry, I want to thank you what you did for someone I love very much. Now, I want you to know today that I'm not going to be preaching for Jerry Falwell. And he'll not be preaching for me, and his services and his music and his stand and his fellowship is light years from where I am. But I happen to love the guy. You say, well, he doesn't love you. I can't control his heart. I know he loves me or not. But I got to keep this spot right here. And one of the reasons that this great church is still moving forward is because I've worked harder on this spot than any other spot on anybody else's body. Our positions on many things are different. But he's a great patriot. When Senator McCain attacked him and called him a force of evil, I wanted to punch McCain in his glorified puss. You see, we were like you are now. Suppose that I had to, and I would never do it, but suppose that I had to sever with my good friend. I mentioned Dr. Gray a while ago, Randy Taylor, Keith Gomez, Dennis Coral, Tom Neal, and others whom I love dearly. I'd die. But wait a minute. These are guys I loved like that years ago. Dr. Gary Coleman. And I'm being very frank, and this is being taped, and I'm saying it in the way that if these men listened to it, I wouldn't mind. Dr. Gary Coleman will tell you he was saved under my preaching. Lavondra Baptist Church contacted me and asked me for a name. I gave them the name of Gary Coleman to pastor. I'm the guy that told the committee about Gary Coleman. I preached for him, I think, 31 consecutive years. He decided one Sunday afternoon, my phone rang, and it was Gary Coleman on the phone. And he said, Brother Hyles, I'm leaving my church. I'm resigning my church. I'm going to Bob Jones University and get some more training. I didn't get the training in fundamental school I ought to gotten. I believe I can serve God better if I go to Bob Jones University and get some more training. And I said, what for? He said, so I can grow a bigger church. At that time, he was running about 500. And I said, give me 5 Bob Jones graduates running 500. There was silence. 4, 3. I talked him into unpacking his furniture and clothes and staying at Lavondra Baptist Church. And he would not have been there for these many years had not I, as his friend, talked him into staying at Lavondra Baptist Church. Our positions now differ. Our standards are now different from each other. Recently, one of my dear friends who was a member of his church passed away. The family called me and said, would you preach the funeral? I said, no, I will not. The pastor, Brother Coleman, should preach the funeral. They said, would you come and at least speak a few words and lead in prayer? And I said, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll write a poem about my friendship to Brother Knoll, and I'll come and read the poem and lead in prayer. I was treated royally while I was there. I enjoyed talking to Gary Coleman. Our positions are different now. But we loved the same guy whose body was lying in state. Now, if keeping on loving somebody that you did love is pussyfooting, then chalk me up as a pussyfooter. Love never faileth. I didn't say fellowship never faileth. I said love never faileth. I doubt if I'll ever preach again at Lavondra Baptist Church, and you don't know what that means to me. A part of me is there. But I love the guy. You don't stop loving somebody. Dr. Bob Jones Sr. and I were dear friends. He called for me on his deathbed, and I went and visited with him shortly before he went to heaven. I was preaching for Dr. Bob Jones Sr., Bob Jones University, where while he was living, they gave me a doctorate even there. I met Bob Jones III. I liked him. He's a lot more like his dad than Bob Jones Jr. was. And I liked him. One day I finished preaching in the Rodeheaver Auditorium there, the one they used to have. And Dr. Bob Jones III was a graduate student there. Don't miss it now. If you're going to hang me, be sure you get the rope straight. Dr. Bob Jones III was a graduate student, and he asked me if he could drive me from the Rodeheaver Auditorium down to the dining hall at Bob Jones University. And I did. He stopped before when we got to the parking lot. He didn't open the door, and he said, Dr. Hyles, I want to tell you something. I said, what's that? Bob Jones III said, I envy you. I said, you envy me? Yes, he said, I envy you. I envy you because your dad was an alcoholic. I understand that. I said, what are you talking about? He said, Dr. Hyles, nobody expected you to ever do anything. But he said, I don't care what I do, I can't match up to my grandfather or my father. And I envy you having an alcoholic dad. My heart was touched, and I loved him. Love never faileth. Don't misunderstand me. It's been years since I recommended anybody to go to Bob Jones University, and I would not recommend a student to go to Bob Jones University. Let that be very, very plain. But I love Bob III. Well, you say, I don't think he loves you. That didn't bother me. It bothers me if I don't love. I've often said happy is the person who is loved. Happier is the person who loves. Happiest is the person who is loved by the person that he loves. When he had his recent battle, got in the political, and that's another thing I wouldn't do. I don't get in this political mess. As far as I'm concerned, let the politicians go somewhere else. We're having preachers on our campus at Hyles Anderson College. But they attacked Bob Jones III. I got in front of a television set the night he was interviewed on a nationwide program, and I pulled for him. Now there goes my invitation to speak in your church. Let me say again, I will not recommend a student to go to a school where you can go for 4 years and never one time go to a fundamental Baptist church. Let me make it very plain. Schools don't build churches, churches build schools. And there's no such thing in this book about a campus church, and I hate the campus church philosophy. But I sit there in front of that television set and pull for Bob III when he was being quizzed in the heat of the battle. He gave a clear plan of salvation, and I was proud of him. And I was against the folks fighting him. Let that be known. Love never faileth. I love David Gibbs. I was preaching in Troy, Michigan. Somebody said that young attorneys out there, Christian Law Association. I did not know it, but David Gibbs had decided he couldn't make it financially. He had decided that he was going to go in private practice. He just couldn't make it in the Christian Law Association. He was going to disband it. That night I preached a sermon, and I did not know this was going on, but David Gibbs came and knelt at the altar and promised God that he would hang in there. He has said to me time and time again, there would be no Christian Law Association if it weren't for Dr. Jack Hyles. I brought him to pastor school. At the amphitheater, some of you folks were there. We raised $37,000 a month support for the Christian Law Association. I loved him. I still think he's the greatest Christian lawyer in America. Though we do not preach together anymore, I believe in him as a lawyer. And as a lawyer, we send him a check for almost $800 a month from our ministry here. Because he's defending freedoms of churches, that if they lose their freedom, I lose my freedom. I love the guy. I said I love the guy. I don't know whether he loves me or not. That's not the issue. I don't have to keep his heart right to keep this thing going here, but I got to keep my heart right to keep this thing going here. And they don't make the man I hate. I said they don't make the man I hate. I've told my people again and again, if Robert L. Sumner were in trouble and I could help him out of trouble. If you don't believe that, you ask my people. You check my record. I said last night, I have a Bible that says love your enemies. Sure, when you get in a fight, you got to fight for your institution and for your truth and all of that. I love because I'm supposed to love. I'm commanded to love. Now you listen carefully to me. I want you guys to go back home and keep your stand on separation. I want you to send your preacher boys to nothing but independent, old-fashioned, soul-winning, fundamental Baptist colleges. I don't want you sending a boy to Pensacola to interdenominational college to learn how to be a Baptist preacher, where you now can hold hands for 15 minutes at a time. I don't know who's keeping score, but I wouldn't send anybody to Pensacola. We don't have a beach, we have an altar. I'm a Baptist, capital B, capital A, and I don't know how to spell the rest of it. I don't hate anybody. They don't make the man. I wouldn't take my shirt off and give it to him if he's in trouble. If you have time, you check the story of the Good Samaritan. He was a different race, but he helped the fellow in trouble. He helped a fellow who hated his race. The Samaritans were a combination of the Assyrian people that came and intermarried with the poor Israelites, while the middle-class craftsmen and rich folks were in bondage in Babylon. And from this union between the Assyrians and the poor Israelites that were in the land after the others had gone to captivity, came forth a race that was hated called the Samaritans. This man was helping a man who hated him. Do you understand? They said to Jesus, "Who is my neighbor?" And he used this story. He was saying, your neighbor is somebody who hates you if they're in trouble. You know, all I'm preaching to you is what you preach to your people and don't practice yourself. But you listen, young preachers, to an old man who's taken his stand, who's probably the most hated preacher in America, most criticized preacher in America. But you listen carefully to me. The day's going to come and you're going to be against the wall. And you're going to need God in heaven to help you. And God in heaven blesses unselfishness. He blesses those that love their friends and love their enemies. The Samaritans were not only a hated race, but of a different religion. This Good Samaritan had nothing in common with this man who was fallen. They were not in the same camp, but they were members of the same human race. And I, mark it down, I, Dr. Jack Hyles, do not want anybody to hurt my friends or my enemies. I love those preachers who are among us who've fallen. I've tried to befriend them. One of my dear friends, for many years, I preached for him in 2 different churches, fell. He got back with his wife. I flew them across the country to Hammond, Indiana, and paid for them to have a second honeymoon and counseled with them to try to get him back, not back in the ministry, but back restored to his wife and his family. I was criticized for it. Well, go ahead, Pharisee, and have fun. My Bible says we're supposed to lift the fallen, bring back those who've been driven away. The greatest greatest source of wasted power in America are the wounded soldiers we've left to die. I love the people who've left our church. And now listen carefully to me. You just get those cute little colloquialisms that you don't believe, but you like to say them, that boost your ego a little bit. Well, we had a backdoor revival. Best thing that ever happened to our church. You're lying through your teeth. You know you are. Best thing could have happened to your church if your people to unite, not divide. And if they do leave, the Spirit of Christ is to love them. We moved into a condominium after 40 years in the same house. A few days after we moved in, an elderly couple moved in that used to go to our church. I said they used to go to our church. They left our church. They moved in. Hear me now. When I saw them one Sunday morning, they were going to their church and I was coming here. She had on pants. She didn't wear pants when she was here. They're going to a church that I would not recommend anybody to go to. They ran to me and she said, Brother Hyles, I heard you're having a heart condition, and tears in her eyes. She said, are you all right? And I said, yes, ma'am, I think I'm going to be able to make it. And she said, I'm so glad. She said, one of the reasons we moved here was because you and Ms. Hyles lived here. She said, we just figured if we'd get in the same building with y'all, God would take care of you and we'd be cared for too. Now, wait a minute. That's somebody left our church. She said, you'll never know how many times a week we stop and think of some things that you taught us while you were there. I love those people. I love them. Now, of course, what you do, you get up and preach against them. These pussyfoot and they're taking back. Yeah, shut up. Some of you guys, some people can stay in your churches for 15 years and put tens of thousands of dollars in your offering plate and go soul winning 15 years and bring members into your church. And then they get mad at you for what may have been your fault or theirs. That's not the issue. The issue is, look at the whole picture. I have a sermon I preached one time here on look at the average. I wouldn't have chosen Peter to preach on Pentecost. 50 days after his cussing. I like what Bill Burr said. Bill was out in the woods, saw a snake, cussed up a storm. I mean, let her rip. Bill Burr, evangelist Bill Burr, cussed. I said, you mean you use dirty words? Yes, sir. He said, I did what God did. I cursed the serpent. Don't miss this. Sitting in these pews every Sunday, faithful, loyal, tithing people are folks who years ago got mad and came back. Why did they come back? Because they're treated like ladies and gentlemen when they left. But that isn't all. 40 years ago when we came, we had a battle over pulling out the American Baptist Convention, over standards, so forth. 406 people left. Wait a minute. Not one word's ever been said unkind about those people. Not one word. Not one word. The pastor whom I followed came back and helped them organize an American Baptist church, and we had a big day in his honor and gave him a brand new Buick car in front of the people here. You say, what you talking about? I'm talking about the fact that I was in a building he built and an office he built, pastoring people. He got saved, and though we had some differences, I owed him a debt, and by cracky, I plan to pay it. And to this day, his wife gets a sizable check every month. He's in heaven now. She gets a sizable check every month from First Baptist Church of Hammond, Indiana. But let's suppose that I had slandered and preached against the people that left. Wait a minute now. Their children would never have, but we have, I'll guarantee you, we have 50 young couples here who were children of people that left this church because they were angry. But they grew up. Brother Hyles had never spoken unkindly about their parents who got mad and left. And they decided they wanted to rear their children where they were reared. And now then, they're back here. And their families are here. Oh, did you ever hear of such words as, here's a word probably you never heard of. Courtesy. Let me tell you another Greek word. Gentleman. Now you listen. I've taken my stand and I've earned the right to say what I'm saying. Some of you guys, you pipsqueaks that have criticized me right now, I got more enemies in my backyard you got in the whole world. I fought more battles in a day than you fought in your ministry. Don't you sit there and criticize me and call me a coward. I'm simply saying, love never faileth. I bumped into my bitterest enemy in a lawyer's office several years ago. The man who set himself for my destruction has given his life for my destruction. I bumped into him in a doctor's office, a lawyer's office. He was sitting over here. I walked in. There were only two people in the waiting room. I walked over and shook his hand and said, I'm glad to see you. I asked him how he was doing. I chatted with him for a while. Why? I happen to love him. Oh, that's another word I want to tell you about. I happen to love him. Now listen to me. Some of you guys, your issue is, I'll not fellowship with him because he said some bad words about me. Well, bully for you. You're going to go down as one of the great Christians in history. Either that or go down. You're not the issue. You have no right to break fellowship with somebody because he criticizes you. All I'm asking you to do is practice what you tell your people to do. I was getting, by the way, this same man, as long as he lived where I knew he lived, this bitterest enemy I've got, I drove by his house every morning and prayed for him. Prayed for God to kill him, but I prayed for him. Every morning I prayed for God to bless him and give him a good day. Now listen carefully to me. All you need is the blessings of Almighty God. And the blessings of Almighty God are determined on the condition of this little thing right here in your breast. I was getting my driver's license a couple of years ago. And there walked in a little lady that had been in our church for 20 years, but got mad at me, bitterly mad at me, and left. And I was so glad to see her. I wanted a Christ in her home. I wanted a Christ. I trained her. I taught her. Her husband. Her family. Do you think because they get mad at me, I can quit loving them? Love never faileth. Get out of here and take your stand. Tell your ladies to wear decent length skirts and burn their pants and their shorts. Tell you fellas to melt their earrings and make gold out of them and put it in the offering plate on Sunday morning. Take your stand. Recommend your people to go to independent, fundamental, old-fashioned, hell-raising, barnstorming Baptist colleges. But love never faileth. Sometimes I wish that weren't in the Bible so I could hate more. When the HIV comes out, that verse is not going to be in it. You see, you're my crowd. This is my crowd. But they were my crowd. And I still love them. Because love never faileth. We'll come back in 1 hour.
In a church our size, we have more than the average number of weddings, and yes, more than the average number of funerals. A funeral is a taxing thing on the preacher, for he has to be strong when he feels weak, and comforting when he himself is hurting. After one particular funeral, Brother Hyles wrote down his thoughts as he talked with a rose.
The funeral is over, and I once again have tried to comfort a family who thinks the clouds will never part and the sun will never peek through again. It has not been easy. I could not cry, though I too loved the brother whom I eulogized. I could not share in the weeping, though I too will miss his companionship. I could not break down, for I was the preacher. But now with you, dear Rose, I sit alone and weep. I weep because one whom I loved has left me. I weep because people whom I love are broken-hearted. I weep because some who have not yet received Christ refused him in the funeral. I weep because the load is heavy and the strain is great. I weep because I too am human, though I dare not reveal that to others. Oh, to be quite honest, beautiful Rose, I slipped in a tear or two as the family was walking out, and I viewed the body of my beloved brother. But I was granted just a brief time to weep before I must turn again to catch the tears of others. Now, Rose, it is just you and I. Do you know you are mentioned only twice in the whole Bible? You're spoken of in Isaiah chapter 35 and verse 1. And Song of Solomon, chapter 2 and verse 1. Do you know that you are called the Queen of Flowers, and that you are a symbol of friendship? Whatever is one's favorite flower, you are loved by all. You, lovely Rose, have a special place in history. Edward III impressed a rose on his coins. The House of Lancaster had as its symbol a red rose, and the House of York a white one. Do you know that you have a place in poetry? Byron wrote, "And her face so fair stirred with her dream as rose leaves with the air." Tennyson said of his Maud, Queen Rose of the Rosebud Garden of Girls. The sculptor with his chisel has tried to capture thy beauty, the poet with his pen, the orator with his eloquence, the singer with his voice, the artist with his brush, and the philosopher with his mind have all sought to describe thy loveliness. You, dear Rose, have been chosen to be a type of the Lord Jesus Christ. You, like Jesus, add beauty everywhere. You are found in the cottage of the poor and the palace of the rich, the marriage altar and the funeral chapel, the altar of the church and the hands of the bride, in the restaurant and the banquet room. You are found in the hands of a lover, on the dress of a lovely lady, in the rich man's garden and in the poor man's field. The busy businessman enjoys thy fragrance, and the stumbling nomad is revived by thy scent. The stingy Scotchman can afford thee, and the proud German kneels to catch thy fragrance. May I, like you, and like Christ, lend beauty wherever I go. Then, too, Queen of Flowers, you, like Christ, are for everyone. You brighten the eyes of the rich man as well as the poor. You are cut by the hands of the saint and also the sinner. You are found on the White House lawn, and your beauty also brightens the ghetto. Your beauty may be seen on the desk of the boss as well as on the bench of the workman. You are found in bunches in the debutante's corsage, and you walk alone in the poor girl's hair. You aid the sermon from the preacher's lapel, and beautify the bride as you come from her hands. Your honor, you make lovely any vessel. Your stems rise from cut glass bowls and also from pickle jars. You live in flower pots and also in Coke bottles. You brighten the wedding and also the funeral. Just a few moments ago, people whom I love looked at you and somehow were comforted. You seem to be just as beautiful in a rusty tin can as in a golden vase, and you are just as admired in a slum window as in mansions' parlors. Everywhere you go, you are always more beautiful than the vase. Maybe this is why we call Jesus the Rose of Sharon. He has to find in us a vase. May I learn that the Rose of Sharon can beautify a tin can like me as easily as he can the golden vase. Your Majesty, you also meet every need. To those who are unloved has been given the moss rose, which symbolizes love. Saddened ones have received the daily rose, which symbolizes a smile. Those who find life complicated have found the burgundy rose, a symbol of simplicity and beauty. The dull life is brightened by the day rose, which symbolizes pleasure. Those carrying heavy burdens love to look at the China rose, which stands for grace. Those whose eyes are weary look at the mush rose, which symbolizes conspicuous beauty. The one who is cold can look at the Provence rose, which represents a warm heart. But, Queen of Flowers, I must tell you, your petals will soon fall. Your beauty will soon fade. You have been cut from the source of life. You have, however, not died in vain. Your death brought joy and comfort to saddened and bereaved hearts. Maybe this is why the Savior is called the Rose of Sharon, for he was also cut off from the land of the living, and in so doing brought life, hope, and eternal life to the world. May I learn from you the lesson that to die is to bless. May I thank you for giving your life to bless, comfort, and encourage someone, yea, several someones whom I love.
And we purposely had these poems and things. By the way, the article that was read is in my book on strength and beauty. And the reason is I know we'd like for preachers in our group to have a heart. We want you to think. We want you to love. We want you to feel. We want you to have a heart. It's a great joy to have my son-in-law and the vice president of Hyles Anderson College speak for us now. Dr. Jack Scott is, as I've said often, is one of America's premier preachers. You won't find better preacher than Jack Scott. He is, if not the premier, he's certainly one of the top Bible teachers in all the colleges in America. He is one of the few men that hold the future of this ministry, and I love him dearly. He's the world's greatest son-in-law. He's the kind of fellow that not only allows his wife to love her dad and to show that love, but he encourages his wife to do so. Every Sunday night, every Wednesday night after church, they come by the office and we spend several minutes together, drink some juice or a beer, something like that. And we spend several minutes together, and as they leave, we always say, the last words I say to Jack Scott is, I love you. I do love him. I'm proud to present to you one of America's great preachers and America's greatest son-in-law, Dr. Jack Scott.
Thank you very much. That's good. Thank you. Thank you. Be seated. Open your Bibles to Revelation chapter 2. Revelation chapter 2. This morning I want to talk to you. Won't be preaching. It'll be a Bible study on this subject, when leadership must correct fellowship. When leadership must correct fellowship. I believe one of the great responsibilities, and I think one of the great privileges of being a leader, is to discipline a follower. I did not say to punish a follower. I said to discipline a follower. Punishment, to be sure, is a part of discipline, but it's a very, very small part. In fact, it's the smallest part of discipline. And it should be the least used part of discipline. Discipline and punishment are only related, but I'm talking about discipline here. I think it's a great privilege to discipline a follower. I'll tell you why. The word discipline comes from the same root word as the word disciple. It means a learner. And those are the terms Jesus chose to use to call his followers, the learners or the disciples or the disciplined ones. And there's probably no greater opportunity to learn than when a good leader corrects a follower. Weak leaders tend to abuse discipline in two areas. First, they tend to neglect or carelessly enforce their discipline. And secondly, they tend to abuse that small part called punishment. They're either lax or they're heavy-handed. And neither extreme is going to give you the long-term employees that you want, like you've witnessed here at Pastor School from those of us. I'm one of the younger fellows at 22 years on staff here. But I'm going to talk to you today about how to discipline. It's fallen on me in the last 4 years to be the overseer of the discipline at our college. And to be honest with you, the first few days and weeks and months I thought about that, I was given the opportunity, and then about 2-3 months later it became official as far as the actual day-by-day work, hands-on. In those 2 months I began to study the job and learn all the different responsibilities that went with being vice president of Hyles College, and of course I knew ahead of time one of those was overseeing the discipline. Every student, if they're getting some significant kind of trouble, winds up eventually in my office. And the first thought I had was, I'm nervous about it. I don't want to. These are people's children. This is somebody's little baby boy. This is somebody's little girl. But almost immediately, I felt the same way toward that job as I do about my own children. I have no worries or fears disciplining my children. In fact, I love disciplining my children. I didn't say spanking. I found no joy in expelling a student from Hyles College. I found very little joy in spanking my children. Oh, I like beating kids, like all of you do. Grab a stick and beat the devil out of them. It's kind of fun. Get it off your chest. And every kid needs a good beating once in a while. But what I'm saying is, I don't find the joy in the expulsion. I don't find the joy in firing an employee. But there's joy in disciplining an employee. If you understand that discipline means learning. And a disciple or a learner or a disciplined one is one who wants to learn. And the right leader with a good follower who wants to be a learner can find that the discipline moment, that time of correcting an error or a mistake or even a transgression, can be one of the best learning experiences of all. I'm talking about as a father and a mother to a child. I'm talking about as an employer to an employee. I'm talking about a pastor to a staff. I'm talking about any type of leadership position to their followers. And so the title of this little talk is When Leadership Must Correct Fellowship. In Revelation chapter 2 and chapter 3, there are 7 very brief letters. In these letters, Jesus Christ is personally addressing 7 different predicaments these churches are facing. In 5 of the 7 churches, the churches have committed some type of error. The errors range from losing affection in Ephesus and becoming cold and dead and orthodox, right doctrine but no heart, no passion, no affection, and all the way to church at Thyatira, which had a woman who behind the scenes was running the show, and it was an immoral called Jezebel as a nickname. She was sleeping with the pastoral staff. There was immorality in the church staff. It was a charismatic type church. There was the church at Pergamos, which is like very similar to the denominational churches that had married the world, become very worldly in their standards and very compromised in their position ecclesiastically. There were other problems. So 5 of the 7 churches needed to have a slap on the wrist to a good kick in the backside. And yet, in these 7 letters, you find a very profound and yet very practical recipe on how to correct a follower. The same recipe I give you here in chapters 2 and 3 of Revelation will work for a daddy correcting a teenage boy. It's the same recipe that'll work for a teacher correcting a pupil. It's the same recipe that'll work for a mama trying to keep control of her children. Same recipe will work for a pastor disciplining a staff. Any leader correcting a follower will find the recipe because, as always, Christ is our supreme example, and he gives 7 beautiful little snapshots of how to handle this matter of disciplining your followers. I want you to use your Bible. We're going to look at several verses. I want you to stay with me. I don't mind if you jot notes down on this. And boy, that's an unusual statement made behind the pulpit of this church, so take advantage of while you can. Brother Hyles doesn't like it much, but you won't forget what he says. You might forget what I say, so you can jot a few notes down, but make sure the notes, and I'll tell you what to write if you'll stay with me. Revelation chapter 2. I want to notice, first of all, now I'm going to call the verses off quickly, so stay up with me. Chapter 2, verse 1, I want you to notice what it says. Unto the angel of the church of Ephesus. Look at verse number 8. And unto the angel of the church in Smyrna. Right. Now look at verse number 12. And to the angel of the church in Pergamos. Right. Look at verse number 18. And unto the angel of the church in Thyatira. Right. Look at chapter 3, verse 1. And unto the angel of the church in Sardis, verse 7. And to the angel of the church in Philadelphia, verse 14. And unto the angel of the church of the Laodiceans. Now, the first principle I want to give you right off the bat is this. Go to the right person. Go to the right person. Unbelievable damage is made by leaders when they don't follow point number 1. Principle number 1, always go to the right person when there's a problem. There's a problem in the church. There's a problem in the home, there's a problem in the classroom, a problem in a college, a problem on a staff, you go to the right person. Huge mistakes and huge blunders can be avoided when we go to the right person. For instance, a youth pastor doesn't need to hear what's wrong with the bus pastor's problems. And the children don't need to hear what's wrong with your wife. And your daughter doesn't need to hear what's wrong with your husband. And the church doesn't hear what's wrong with the staff. And the staff doesn't need to hear what's wrong with everybody's marriage you're counseling with. And the children don't need to hear what's wrong with the one person that you're having trouble with. And the principals and the teachers don't need to hear what's wrong with the classroom. You make a mistake when you include people or go to people who have no power to fix a problem. Now, the wrong people are those who can't correct the problem. The right person is the one who has the power to fix the problem. Jesus said, I'm talking to the only person who has the power to fix this church problem. Preacher. So he goes to the pastor, the angel. Now, most of us here, I'm going to guess all of us here, believe that the word angelos was transliterated, A-N-G-E-L-L-O-S, angelos, from the Greek word to angel. But it wasn't translated. The word means messenger. And the word angelos, meaning messenger, the messenger of the church is none other than the preacher, the man who brings the message to the church. In this situation, the church had a problem, so Jesus went to the only person in the church who could correct the problem. That's the leader. You teachers here, there's problems in your classroom. You got to find out who the ringleader is and who the person is causing the problems. You don't scold people generally. You don't scold people, the whole crowd. You don't scold your church for one person giving you problems. You don't scold your church because the staff's giving you problems. We don't take it out in the chapel at college because we're having a problem with a couple who's misbehaving. I deal with them. Now, an incident just happened right before here, a little discipline problem. I've got to meet a young man right after I'm done here, and he's the person who has the problem. He has the power to fix it, and so we won't take it to this whole student body. We'll just talk to the one person. Number one, go to the right person. Go to the right person. Number two, I want you to look back at chapter 2, verse 1. Same verses again, and I want you to notice this. It says, unto the angel of the church of Ephesus write. Now notice, these things saith he that holdeth the 7 stars in his right hand, who walketh in the midst of the 7 golden candlesticks. He's describing himself there. Now see how Jesus describes himself in verse number 8. Unto the angel of the church of Smyrna write, these things saith the first and the last, which was dead and is alive. Totally different description. Did you notice that? The first one, he says, I have visited your church. I've been walking up and down the pews of the church. I've been inside your church. I know your people very well, preacher, and I know what's going on there. Now, he's talking about how he's describing himself here. In the second one, he says, I have died and I am alive. I'm the resurrected Christ. Look at verse number 12. Unto the angel of the church in Pergamos write, these things saith he which hath the sharp sword with 2 edges. I'd duck if I were in that church. That's a little more severe description there. And a totally different description. Hold on, it gets tougher. Look at verse 18. Unto the angel of the church in Thyatira, right? These things saith the Son of God, who hath his eyes like unto a flame of fire, and his feet are like fine brass. He says, I'm boring a hole through you, son, and you better watch out. I'm going to plant my boot where it's going to have to be surgically removed. That was real different than saying I'm the resurrected Christ. Resurrected Christ, hey, you're having a hard time, and I know what you're going through. I've been there, done that, got the video and the t-shirt. He says, this one, he said, you don't want the video of this one. It's going to be painful. Look at chapter 3, verse number 1. Unto the angel of the church in Sardis write, these things saith he that hath the 7 spirits of God. That's the fullness of the Spirit. And the 7 stars, that's the preachers. I know thy work. Now, there's a totally different description. He says, I've got the preachers here, and I've got the power of God here. He says, maybe you two ought to get together. That's not a bad idea. That's not the lesson, but I'd like to stop there for a while. Look at verse number 7. To the angel of the church in Philadelphia write, these things saith he that is holy, he that is true, he that hath the key of David, he that openeth, and no man shutteth, and shutteth, and no man openeth. He's the giver and taker of opportunity there. Totally different description. And finally, verse 14, unto the angel of the church of the Laodiceans write, these things saith the Amen, the faithful and true witness, and the beginning of the creation of God. Now, 7 different descriptions, totally different descriptions. Here's my point. I said, point number 1, go to the right person. Number 2, wear the right hat. Wear the right hat. What am I saying there? Explain how you are coming to that person. Huge mistake. When I wind up counseling teenagers, and I work with teenagers 7 days a week. That's been my life for 25 years in the ministry, teenagers and young adults. When I work with them, let me take a classic category. The category that is most difficult to work with is moms and dads trying to rear adult children. I'm talking about all the parents of the kids in our college. I'm talking about all the parents of the young people, young adults in my Sunday school class of single adults, age 18 to 30. I'm talking about adult moms and dads trying to exercise control and authority and enforce rules on adult children who have the right to say adios. The problem comes, and that's one good example, is when a leader only wears one hat. Here's a dad that always comes to his son and says, I'm your father. Now, I reserve that for my son. I reserve the highest title I have with my son is father. And I only reserve that for the times when he's got to listen and I mean business, and I haven't thought of another way to do it. Or when I'm busy and tired and he's really bothering me a whole lot. Now, what I'm saying is, when you come, all right, the young man who's in the room here, in a few minutes we're going to meet. I will be the vice president of Hyles Anderson College. That is not good. Now, I can come to a student and say, you know, I was a preacher boy here one time, 23 years ago. May I talk to you as a preacher boy who wanted to keep his testimony real clean because I had a future ahead of me? That's a whole different approach than saying, I'm the vice president here. I'm in charge of discipline, son. Or I can say to a young man, you know, I'm a sinner, like you are. Let's talk about the temptations you're facing. I can say to my son, can I talk to you as an older teenager who's gone through adolescence? That's a whole different approach. And depending how I describe myself, that lets the person know how much they can say to me, what they can get by with saying, how much I'll allow them to say, and how far we're going to go in correcting this problem. How tough I'm going to be. When you only have one title with your followers, if every time you want to correct a student, for instance, teacher, you say, I'm the teacher of this classroom. That's the highest title you have. You're always coming out of the sledgehammer every time. I'm the teacher of this classroom. Church problems. I'm the pastor of this church. That's the highest title there is. Reserve the highest title for times when you absolutely, positively must use it. If a BB gun will work, use that. If a pop gun will work, use that. If a baseball bat is needed, use that. If you need a machine gun, use that. Now keep a nuclear weapon, but just reserve that for when you need it. We're nuking our children and our marriages. And I'm the man of this house. Well, I'm glad you told us. I have a friend of mine. Well, I know a guy. He had about 6 kids, and he was having trouble with them, so he got his family together, and he walked in front of them and says, you know who I am? Well, it's pretty bad when you got extra kids who you are. He said, you know what these are? It's pants. He says, guess who's wearing them? I am. Now, that was his total way of dealing with all problems in his home. Now, if that's the only way you deal with problems, reminding people you wear the pants, boy, you better get a bit bigger wardrobe. Some of you ought to get some Bermuda shorts. You know, you're too heavy-handed. You're too authoritative. Some people don't need a heavy hand. They need guidance. My Bible says, faith for the wounds of a friend. Maybe you need a friend. Maybe you need to come to a follower. Not to a friend, to a follower and say, can I be a buddy for a few minutes? I said to my son 100 times. And like I said, I welcome discipline because it allows me 100 different avenues to train a boy. And I rarely use father. I think in the 15 and a half years my son has been in my home, I think I've used father twice. I just don't use it very often because I want to reserve that in case he really needs that. Usually I say to him, Ken, his name's Kenny. I said, Ken, can I talk to you as the husband of your mother on how to treat a lady? I said, son, can I talk to you as a young man who dated and won the heart of a girl successfully? Let me tell you how to treat a woman. I'll say, son, can I talk to you as an adolescent who made a lot of mistakes and grew out of it? I said, let me tell you something. You've never been 42, but I have been 15. Let me tell you about the mistakes I made. A lot of ways to approach her than say, listen, I'm the man, I'm dad, you do what I tell you. Boy, that's a big mistake. Because those of us who don't use that wind up having to patch up your stupidity. Your followers run to us and say, I can't get along with my dad. See, when you're sending a kid off to college, now listen to me carefully because there's few areas that I know just a little bit. You know more than I do in every other area. But when you send your kids off to college and you say, if that's the way it's going to be, don't ever come home. Click. Your kid's got to go somewhere. It's so easy to slam that phone down, isn't it? Boy, you feel good doing that? Told them who the dad was. Yep, and that's why they don't invite you to the wedding. Guess whose office they run to? They come and say, Brother Scott, what do you do when your mom and dad are acting like juveniles? I'm adult. I'm 21 years old. I have my own job. I'm paying my way through school. And mom and dad want to treat me like I'm 13 years old. Well, my choices are pretty limited. Hello, mom and dad. Lighten up, baby. And most parents don't want to listen to that, and we can logic. I'm a parent, so I can logic with you, and do you want me to call up and say, I'm the vice president of this college, let me tell you something. You don't want to do that. I have no leadership over you, so I have to come to you through the back door, don't I? And say, may I talk to you as a parent of teenage children who is as frustrated about how they don't listen to me as yours are, and yours don't listen to you? Can I talk to you as a friend who is struggling with 2 teenage children himself? I have to go to the back door, and usually you and I can come to an agreement then. Why can't you do the same thing with all your followers? Jesus said, preacher, got to talk to you. Let me tell you who I am. Let me tell you I'm coming to you. That is so very important. Classic illustration. 12 years ago, my home church was looking for a pastor. About 13 years ago, looking for a pastor. And my dad, being the chairman of the deacon board, thought it'd be pretty cool if his son was the pastor. So he put my name in and took a straw poll vote, and I had a pretty good running opportunity. Well, in the process of time, it got serious, and he met with Brother Hyles, and Brother Hyles gave him permission to talk to me as an employee, and so he talked to me officially, made an official phone call. Well, I had to go this process then of, do I stay or leave? I mean, here's every preacher boy's dream, pastor your home church, and wow, what an opportunity. One of my principles was I was going to make sure the pastor had veto power in my life, because if I go pastor, I wanted to have veto power with the people in my church. So I have to be consistent and just, so I gave my pastor veto power. Well, I made an appointment with Brother Hyles and went to his office, and he said, well, I've been expecting you. And I said, yes, and I've been dreading this. And I said, I need to talk to you about this whole manner of my leaving to go pastor. He said, okay, how would you like me to counsel you? That's wise. And I said, well, what do you mean? He said, I'm your father-in-law. I'm your boss. I am a preacher of the gospel. I am a pastor. I am your pastor. Which one? I said, all 5. Maybe 3 out of 5 and I go, stay, whatever. He's okay, your father-in-law. He said, Jack, I'd love it. He said, the church is only 2.5 hours away. He said, you'd be close enough. We could get together weekly if we had to. I could drive halfway up. Mrs. Hyles and I could. I could see the grandkids. He said, you're close enough. As a father-in-law, it's within that zone of comfort that every father says, don't take my daughter too far away. He says, I'd love it. He says, go pastor. I said, boss? He says, as a boss, I never keep my employees captive. He said, if they want to go, if you think this is the will of God, you got my blessings. I'll support you for a couple more months. He says, raise the capital for you. He says, and I'll invest in your ministry. Well, 2 out of 2, that's not too bad. I said, how about as a pastor? As a pastor, he says, it's the greatest job in all the world. I would covet for every preacher to be a pastor of a local church. Whew, what an opportunity. He said, a pastor. I said, 3 for 3. I said, how about as a preacher? He's a preacher. He said, I think you're a fine preacher. He says, I love preaching. He said, the opportunity for you to preach in a congregation every week, 3 or 4 times a week. He said, I'd love it, he said. I think you do a fine job. He said, I think you could successfully pastor a church. I said, okay, as my pastor. He said, I unequivocally, unambiguously, with no shadow of doubt, veto the idea. It would be the tragedy of your life. I said, I should have stopped when I was ahead. You catch the wisdom of that? I walked out of there slightly unhappy because I didn't take the church. I wanted to pastor that church. I was heavy-hearted, but I learned. I was disciplined. I was instructed. And I learned great principles on how to deal with followers because I was not smart enough to know how to make that decision. Have many hats you wear, Mama. Have many hats you wear, Pastor. Pastors with teenagers, you need to wear many hats. Your teenagers can't just have you as preacher. If you saw the way our teenagers trash Brother Hyles' office on Saturdays, you'd say, is he the pastor or not? Not on Saturday mornings. He's one of the boys. He's just an older teenage boy. They're trash his office, sticking bubble gum inside the telephone. They're gluing the buttons of his phone down, taping it. They walk in there and cut up and tease and have fun, take the pictures off the wall, turn them upside down. That's a time for him to be an older teenage boy and let his boys and girls know that he's a lot of fun. Now he sits down and talks to them about their senior appointment. He did the same thing he did with me. He said, as a pastor, as a friend, as a buddy, as a pal, as an older teenager, here's what I think you ought to do. Now, as your pastor, let me tell you what I think you ought to do. Wear many hats and tell them how you are coming. Let me give you a third principle here. Number one, go to the right person. So important. Number two, wear the right hat. Number three, know your facts. Know your facts. I'm going to read the verses quickly for you. Chapter 2, verse number 1, I know thy works and thy labor, thy patience. Verse number 9, I know thy works and tribulation and poverty. Verse 13, I know thy works and where thou dwellest and where Satan's seat is. Verse number 19, I know thy works and charity and service and faith and thy patience and thy works. Chapter 3, verse number 1, the middle part of it, I know thy works, that thou hast a name, that thou livest and art dead. Verse number 8, I know thy works. Chapter 3, verse number 15, I know thy works, that thou art neither cold nor hot. I would thou wert cold or hot. Number 3, principle, know the facts. Know the facts. Proverbs 18, verse 13 says, he that answereth a matter before he heareth it, it is folly and shame unto him. When you're correcting a follower, when you're disciplining a follower, be certain you know the facts. As vice president of the college, it's my duty to handle all the expulsions. When expulsion is cared for, we have trained people who get the information from the student, usually a dean or one or two counselors in the discipline committee. They take the information. The student is asked some questions. The student reads the careful notes we take during that time of questioning. The student signs his name as to the facts of it and the accuracy of it, dates it. Then it is brought to my office. The student is given, like an appellate court, a hearing. Anything you want to say? Are these facts correct? You want to change them at all? Do you feel that we misrepresented this information here? Anything else I should know that you want to give? You want to make a comment? You make a question? Anything you want to ask? Is this accurate? Yes. And they are, again, the facts are going over very carefully. Then the committee votes, and then that vote is taken to the administrative committee, and then the administrative committee votes whether this be expulsion or not. In other words, a very elaborate process of making sure the facts are there, so nobody who's expelled from the college can ever say, I wasn't given fair, just treatment. Nothing wounds a spirit of a follower more than when they think you are coming down on them or correcting them when you do not know all the facts. Even if it's clear cut, there are expulsions that were automatic expulsions, where the administration says to me, you don't even have to go through the process, because if a student does that and they admit to it, get them out of here, we still go through the process. Because I want that person, no matter how egregious the transgression was, I want that person to be treated as a human being and to be given a right to say, may I give you my side of the story? Everybody is allowed their side of the story. There are always two sides to a story, and sometimes 3 or 4, 10 or 20. And the wise counselor and the wise discipliner and the wise leader knows he doesn't have all the facts until he's heard both sides of the story. Only Jesus has perfect knowledge. And since you don't, make sure that follower knows and feels, there's a key word there, that you know what you're talking about. Jesus, I know the facts. I've studied you carefully. Principle number 4. Commend them before you correct them. Commend them before you correct them. This is beautiful. I mean, there are churches in Revelation 2 and 3. They're charismatic, they're immoral, they're worldly, they're denominational, that fill all the things that we despise, and yet Jesus in those churches says, let me point out something good I like about you first. When you've got to come down on somebody, in fact, however you got to come down, it's very important that you know them well enough to say, by the way, I've caught you doing something good. That's a good statement. Catch your followers doing right more than you catch them doing wrong. Your job as a leader is not just point out what's wrong. Your job as a leader is to discipline them. Discipline means learning, training, discipling them, nurturing them, building them up. And one of the best ways to do that is, you know what, I got you. Doing a real good job, but I'm very proud of you. And I don't think, especially younger leaders have not earned the right to scold their followers until the follower thinks, this guy knows me so well, he knows what I do right as well as what I do wrong. And when you find somebody doing right and you mention that to them, that disarms them. We sometimes call it the sandwich method. Tell them what you like, and when you close, tell them what's something good about them as well, and promise, and a little meat in between there of the absolute problem. Call it what you like. Jesus' method here is, let me point out what I like first. Then, Ephesus, he says, I know your works. I know your doctrine. You can't stand those who are doctrinally impure. He says, I like that. He said, you're a very discerning church. The church at Thyatira, he says, you're charismatic. He says, you got a woman, you're immoral. But you know what? You are a fast-growing church. He says, you're working harder now than when you started that puppy. He says, man, I'm proud of you the way you're working and building that thing. He's just zealous. Church in Pergamos, he complimented them. Church in Philadelphia, he complimented them. You see, before he scolded them, he said, let me tell you what I like about you. It does so much for a teenage boy or a teenage girl when dad or mom says, let me tell you some things I like about you. They're not going to say, this is great. Tell me what you don't like now. That doesn't happen. But they are going to say in their heart, hey, at least I'm getting fair treatment. At least they are earning the right to tell me they don't like about me. Now let me go on. I said principle number 1, go to the right person. Boy, I'd like to just hammer that one again and again, but I don't have time. Go to the right person. Stop talking to people that can't fix the problem. I said number 2, explain how you are coming to them or wear the right hat. Number 3, know your facts. Number 4, commend them before you correct them. Point out the good you have noticed. Principle number 5, point out the exact problem. Be precise. Never scold in a general fashion. Let me tell you some things that I hate to hear leaders say. You have no character. Dumb, 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 dumb. Don't ever tell them they have no character. They didn't have to show up on their appointment to get beat, didn't they? They're there in your office getting kicked. They had no character. They weren't even showing up for that. When I said to my son, come here, I'm going to spank you, and he went towards me, he has character. He doesn't have character to obey my authority. Even if the authority is to bend over to get a spanking, that still is enough character to respond. When you destroy the person's character, you take away the toolbox they're going to have to fix the problem. No character? Boy, that's pretty absolute. That's devastating. They've never been on time. They've never done anything good for you. They've never come through. Why'd you hire them, doofus? You don't do your homework. You should have made a reference call, fathead. I'm sorry, this isn't college. I think a church ed here. Beloved brethren in the Lord. And you call up and say, why didn't you tell me so-and-so? Because you didn't ask. Do your homework. By the way, it's not fair to hire somebody without doing your homework and checking out and then ream them out because you did a bad job checking on them. You hired them, you stay with them. Point out the exact problem. When Jesus said, nevertheless, I have somewhat against thee, he said, I've got one particular thing. He said, you're discerning, you're hardworking, you're loyal, you're faithful, you hold my name. One problem, let me define it. He takes a magnifying glass and says, see it? That's that one thing. You can fix that, can't you? Let me give you a little information here. Always point out an action to fix, not a character to change. I can fix an action. I correct action. I compliment character. I say this, you've got great character. I said to a girl who was stealing in a college. Now, stealing can be an almost automatic expulsion, but I said to the girl, I said, I think you've got great character. I said, you know what, it's very noble for a young lady like you to come to college like this. This is a tough college. As I compliment you on coming, I said, and your track record other than this one matter is very good. I said, you have a whole lot of good in you. That's nice general terms. I'm trying to let her know that generally she's an okay person. I said, we got one problem. You got sticky fingers. I said, that's an egregious problem. Going to get you in big trouble. I said, but that's a fixable problem. Always define the problem as a specific, precise action and not a general problem. Look, if you take your car in to get it fixed, the guy says, it's a wreck. That'll be $500. Oh, yeah, I know it's a wreck. I'm a Hyles Anderson College student. It's a wreck, okay? Everything's wrong with it. Like what? Everything. It has no character. Okay, start with one. Well, the water pump. Now I can fix a water pump. And the radiator. I can flush the radiator. And the tires. I can fix the flat tire. That it? Yeah, that's it. I mean, there's only 3 things wrong? Yeah, it's a wreck. Most of us look at people and say, you're a wreck. But they're tithing. You're living in a house paid for by their tithe. It's amazing how we wipe out all the good. When they have no character. No character means I haven't had time to study you very well, and so generally I'm a wreck, and so you're a wreck, and everybody's a wreck. Here a wreck, there a wreck, everywhere. You know. Just thank God don't work for you. You know, around here, it's a statement by those who've been here for many, many years that's almost worth getting in trouble so you can be disciplined by the preacher man. I wouldn't know, of course, but because he's so instructive. You think it's funny, huh? I bet you won't laugh in his office. Dr. Evans said that one of the greatest disciplining moments of his life at Bob Jones University as a student was when a respected staff member said, "Wendell, I think better of you than that." Boy, that was a simple little correction. He said he let me know that he thought so well of me that he didn't think that action I had committed was part of my... And often I'll say this to a student, that's not a character for you. What I've done is I've retained the toolbox to fix a problem. A person has got to walk out saying, I can fix that. I'll show him I can fix that. Principle number 6. Explain the consequences of the error. Jesus said, if you don't fix this, here's what's going to happen. Great principle. Decisions have consequences. One of the hardest lessons to teach young people. Decisions have consequences. But Scott, I know I didn't get a pass, and I didn't do this, I didn't do that. I know I wasn't in school, I missed chapel, I know I got umpteen thousand demerits, but can you help me? Sure, there's the door. Now, here's your hat. What's your hurry, buddy? Now, what happens is it's a great principle to learn. That is when you're correcting them and say, see this one problem we have right here? Now, let me tell you something. If you don't fix that problem, here's what's going to happen. They need to know that. They need to know that every decision has a consequence. Vital. Number 7. Principle number 7. Offer an incentive for the follower to correct the problem. All 7 times Jesus said, he that overcometh, I will. And he obligated himself to make a special investment in the person or the church that corrected the problem. I like that. Tell you why. Because that's creative leadership. The leader saying, let's work on this together. Tell you what. Here's what I like about you. Here's the problem we have. If you don't fix it, here's what I've got to do. You'll force me to do this. However, if you fix a problem, let me do this for you. That shows the follower that the leader is interested in developing them and maturing. It's a vote of confidence for them while you're slapping them. I think every time you have to correct a follower, there should be an incentive for them to do so. Jesus did. And if Jesus offered an incentive, we dead sure need to. The wise leader studies his followers so that he not only knows their strengths and weaknesses, but he also knows what inspires them. There are 7 different offers he made. It wasn't the same motivation each time, because the church at Ephesus would respond one way, the church at Sardis another way, church at Smyrna another way. Now let me give you 3 real fast practical ideas. That's all we'll have time for. Number 1, correct privately, compliment publicly. Correct privately, compliment publicly. People like other people, especially their peers, to know that they're pretty good and that you think well of them. One of the nicest things Brother Hyles does is has the full-time staff men lead in prayer for all the public services. It's an opportunity for him to compliment publicly. It's a way for a staff man to say to all of his peers vicariously, see, I'm a pretty good guy. I'm pretty valuable. Preacher needs me too. Very important that people hear you bragging on them publicly about what you like about them, but that nobody hear you scold them publicly. I'm not talking about you got to fix a problem in a public service. I'm not talking about telling an usher don't let people. That's not scolding. That's not disciplining. That's keeping things. That's good leadership in a public arena. I'm talking about in the work arena. I'm talking about in the classroom. Problem with Johnny, and Johnny's for correction. I said, Johnny, don't do that. That's one thing. But if you've got to take Johnny aside and take time to discipline him, you don't want to do that publicly. You take him privately, do that. If you've got a staff member who's giving you grief, you don't do it publicly. You take care of it privately. People need to keep their humanity intact. Don't make them animals. Don't beat them publicly. Scold them privately. Number 2, have clear rules and policies in writing. If you have your rules and policies in writing, it takes care of so much. You know how many times as a discipline counselor, I just get their handbook out and say, son, would you read that? Yes, sir. He reads it. I say, any questions? He says, no, it's pretty clear. Well, it's pretty clear, Brother Scalpa, isn't it? Yeah, it's pretty clear. What does the policy say what happens when you do that? 35 demerits. What do you think I should do? Oh, it looks like you got to give me 35 demerits. I said, man, I don't want to do that, but the rules are doing it. Man, I'm sorry. I wouldn't give you any, but you know what the rule book is. I gave a boy 115 demerits one day. We were all done. I had him read them all. He walked out and he says, I want to thank you, Brother Scalpa. He says, it's been a real great privilege to be with you. I thought, you're an idiot. I shut the door on him. I thanked you. I said, God bless you. He shut the door, and the man on the committee looked at me and says, good night. I've never heard anybody thank you for giving 115 demerits before. Hey, you got to be good. When you get people thanking you, that means you're on a pretty good system. People walk out of there and say, now, I've had those too, but I'm not going to tell you my failure stories. I'm going to tell you my success stories. Just one. Have the rules and policies written down very clearly. When my wife and I were rearing our children, when they're young, little kids, we had 7 rules for spanking them. 7 reasons I would spank our children. Only those 7. They were written down on the refrigerator where all good things are written in homes. And we went over each one. If they violated that, it was a spanking. Whether I felt like it or didn't feel like it was a spanking. If they didn't do that, it wasn't a spanking. And there's no questions asked. And that made it real simple for us, so there's no subjectivity. Number 3, decide the consequences when the rule is made, not when the rule is broken. What happens if they break that rule? Decide it now, before you know of anybody who's broken it. Because if your favorite staff member breaks it, you're going to be lenient, and if the guy you wish would quit breaks it, you're going to be tough as nails. And that's injustice. That's not blind justice. That is partiality. The Bible has a lot to say about people who lead that are partial. David said, he that ruleth must be just. Decide the consequences when the rule is made, not when the rule is broken. Number 4, take whatever time is necessary to deal with the matter. Never rush disciplining. Never. If it's not, when my wife, when I spanked our children, and I didn't do the lion's share of it because I wasn't home during the bulk of the time the children were awake. But when I did the spanking, it was a long ordeal. Not the spanking itself was very brief. The spanking wasn't long. The ordeal that surrounded it was very long. I'm talking about 45 minutes to 60 minutes. Because I saw this as one of the great opportunities to teach my son or daughter how to correct this so it wouldn't happen again. If you're disciplining people quickly off the cuff in the hallway, for instance, if a staff member did something wrong the other day, I had to correct a staff member and who works in my department and is in the hallway, and the staff member was just a little stressed out. And if you don't like it, then we'll just tell me what you don't like about it. I said, let's make an appointment and talk about this later. First of all, I wanted to tell him what I thought, but the hallway is no place to do that. That's public. Secondly, right now, I don't have all the facts. Thirdly, you as a human being deserve better treatment than off the cuff. Let me tell you what I think about you. Fourthly, I don't like your attitude right now, and I think it stinks. So I really think about you. Number 5, I got to teach in pastor school. I want to follow my own advice. I'm going to be a hypocrite. Take the time. We made an appointment. We met in the office. We wound up cutting up. We laughed together. We shook hands together, and we had a great time. And he thanked me for the discipline. God bless you. Thank you.
I've been back in the back listening, and I trained him well. He said, now, in closing, 3 points. And he cut it down to 5, I noticed. All right, we'll come back at, let's see, at 1 o'clock. Don't be late, be on time, and have a good lunch.